So when people were asked to choose which reading they thought was theirs, 13 out of 16 times people chose their own reading. That's 81%, also statistically significant. And I'd just like to point out, one of the three that didn't pick I interviewed them afterwards of why they made the choice that they did. And he had scored a lot of the things when the medium was describing the way the person looked, the personality, the hobbies. He was scoring those things as correct in his own reading. And then not so much in the other reading, but he picked that other one. So I was asking him why that was, and he said, well, in this reading, the medium described the dead person as a boy, and in this one, she described him as a man. And my friend was 17 when he died, so he was a man. But to a medium who's in her 50s, that's a boy. So that was, and the sitter was 18. This study we did at the university with college freshmen. One of the reasons why we only work with people who are 25 and older now. But so I liked, I'm not going to claim that it was 14 out of 16, but it should have been 14 out of 16. I'll just say that. So this quintuple blind protocol controls for all the explanations that a skeptic will give you for why this works, why mediumship works. This is my picture of a skeptic. I'm sure you're familiar with this face. This face gets made at us a lot. So this quintuple blind protocol controls for fraud, because how is the medium going to look up your credit card number or whatever when all they have is the first name of the deceased person? It prevents experiment or cueing, because I'm blind, so, the medium can't be doing the reading and saying, well, for cause of death, I think that, I'm feeling some pain in the head, and I go, do you mean colon cancer? I can't swing it. I can't swing it because I don't know. I can't steer the medium anyway, even unintentionally, because I don't know the answers. I don't know what the right answers are. It prevents what's called rater bias. So depending on your personality, you may have the tendency to score things as either more or less accurate than they actually are in reality. And that evens out because we give you two readings and you score them both as to how well that they apply to your deceased person. So if you have a tendency to score, to give the medium the benefit of the doubt and score everything as correct, then you'll score both of them as everything as correct. And if you're very skeptical and you only score things as hits that are definite hits, then you'll score them both low. And again, we don't have a bar that we're looking for. We just are looking for the difference between the two. So that prevents that. It prevents the issue of a medium reporting information that's so general it could apply to anyone, because we ask for specific information. We ask for personality and physical description and hobbies and cause of death. And then it prevents what's called cold reading, which is the medium using visual or auditory cues to fabricate what appears to the sitter to be an accurate reading. And this is my favorite example of cold reading. So this is talking to the dead with your host, Rat. And so Rat is saying, is there a Karen in the studio audience tonight? Yes, it's me. I'm here with my brother. So he already has prior information about the sitter. He has the sitter's name. And it says, and I'm told you have a cousin who's passed. Yes, we do. So now he knows the relationship. Wait, I think he's here. I think this is him. He's telling me that when his life ended, his heart stopped. Yes. When he died, his heart stopped. So very general information. I think I'm seeing his face. Did your cousin, did he have a forehead? Yes, he did. Whoa, hang on. I'm feeling this very strong. He's giving me his name. He's giving me, is it Bob? It's him. We love you, Bob. But they have t-shirts on that say, we miss you, Bob. Talk to us, Bob. And then this guy said, oh, wow, how does he do that? That's cold. It's kind of a good example of all of those things that this protocol controls for. All right, we got about 10 minutes. So with that protocol, and if you just look at the data, the mediumship data collected over the last century, you can say that anomalous information reception is occurring, but you can't say where that information comes from. So you can eliminate all the normal explanations, but you're still left with 3 paranormal explanations. The first is survival of consciousness or life after death. It's something, some part of us somehow continues to exist after our physical body dies. And then what Dean had talked about earlier, super psi, which is the medium using clairvoyance, precognition, or telepathy to fabricate this or to create this reading that has all this information about the dead. And then what's called the psychic reservoir hypothesis, which is the theory that all information since the beginning of time exists somewhere and somehow in the universe, and a medium is accessing that cosmic store. I heard someone recently call it the cosmic hard drive, rather than actually communicating with a deceased person. So Alan Gauld, in his book Mediumship and Survival, said if there were no evidence at all for ESP, the case for survival could well be much stronger than it is. But there is a lot of evidence, as we learned this morning, for ESP. So it's iffy which one it is, if it's survival or those. I group those other two, super psi and psychic reservoir, as just one thing, psi. So we joke about in the lab, well, if you want to design that into an experiment that you want to try and tease those two apart, you have to ask a medium for something that they couldn't get from using psi. So we say, well, then we need to ask them for information that doesn't exist anywhere in the universe and never will. That's just about the only way that you can test for those. So Patricia B. McConnell is an animal behaviorist, but I think she was talking about animal emotion when she said this, but I think it fits. Just because an explanation makes us feel good doesn't mean it can't be true. So just because we hope that survival is the right one, doesn't mean that it doesn't eliminate it as being possible that it is the right one. Okay, so that was proof-focused research, and now I'm going to talk about process-focused research. So historically, like I said, most of the mediums were trance mediums, so they were unconscious during the process, and they couldn't tell you how it was like because they weren't actually there. And today, that's not the case. So this second arm of research that we're interested in is studying the medium's experiences during the reading. So if you simply ask a medium, scientists are arguing on and on and on, well, you can't differentiate between survival and psi. But if you just ask a medium, they'll go, well, yeah, I can. And most mediums perform psychic readings for clients also. So they know what clairvoyance, telepathy, and precognition feel like. And it feels much different. The experience is much different than when they're communicating with the deceased. So these are some things that actual mediums have said about this dichotomy. When a spirit is specifically there, I can feel them energetically. My body feels them. Psychically, I will feel information coming from a person. Spiritually, I will feel a presence in the room. And this is my favorite one. A psychic reading is like reading a book, and a mediumship reading is like seeing a play. So it's very different. So we have systematically investigated the medium's experiences during communication to help us better make that distinction between survival and psi. And I think actually that's probably a good place to stop. So let's have lunch. And we'll do some questions. We'll have lunch and come back at 2:30, but I'll take some questions for a couple minutes.
Well, what about people call channeling, like Wanda and others that are not necessarily someone who died, but
So people that channel not dead people, but other beings. Yeah. We haven't looked at that specifically, and those cases are really hard to verify, especially if it isn't a dead person. Like, how do you verify what's happening in heaven or what wherever they're reporting to come from? So, what's that? Zeta Reticuli? Is that their name of their city that they live in? Oh. I wasn't familiar with that. It was mostly a joke, yeah. Lunch. I hope everyone had a lovely lunch. Before lunch, we were talking about how with proof-focused data, you can show evidence for anomalous information reception, but you can't say where that information comes from. And so we're left with two main categories, survival of consciousness and then the psi theories, super psi, and then the psychic reservoir, which is like Jung's collective unconscious or the Akashic record or that sort of thing. But if you ask a medium, they can clearly tell the difference. So we decided to bring that into the laboratory and systematically investigate the medium's experiences. So one of the first things we did was this quantitative analysis of the medium's experiences during a discarnate reading versus a control task. So we did a reading that was part of a study, so it was just an experimental reading, like I described earlier, with where they were given the first name on the phone. And then counterbalanced either 7 days before or 7 days after that reading, then we did a control condition where that same medium was just on the phone with me and we just had a chat so that we weren't communicating with any deceased people and we just talked about a living person that the medium knew. So it mimicked the experience, and the only thing that was different was the communication with the dead person or not. And then we used this instrument called the Phenomenology of Consciousness Inventory, or PCI. And the PCI is a 53-item questionnaire that quantifies 26 different dimensions of consciousnness. So the mediums filled out the PCI after the mediumship reading and then after the control condition, and then we compared the two. And all of this phenomenology data where we're studying the medium's experiences, I work with our colleague in Australia, Adam Rock. He's at Deakin University in Australia, and Adam is a psychologist, and his training is in phenomenology, so he does the analysis on these studies. So this is, again, there are 26 different dimensions that the PCI quantifies, but these are just some of the more interesting ones, I thought. So negative affect, so negative emotions, the mediums experienced higher in the reading condition. So after communicating with the dead, they had more negative emotions than when they were just chatting on the phone with me. And if you think about it, that actually makes sense because oftentimes in a reading, the person is talking about, that they miss the people and that they're sorry, that they're grieving, and sometimes there's, unresolved issues come up and apologies and remorse and that. So there's lots of negative emotions can come up during a reading. And then the other thing that was higher in the reading condition was altered time sense. So the mediums were not able to keep track of time as well as they were during the control condition. So they lost track of time during the reading. And then in the other direction, volitional control was lower during the reading condition. So some of the questions in the PCI that get to that are like, I had the experience of things popping into my mind. So you have less control. The mediums had less control over what was happening, what they were thinking about, than they did during the control chat. And then the other one is memory was lower in the reading condition. So they weren't able to remember what had happened during the phone call as well as they were during the control condition. And those are all statistically significant differences. Dean.
So the variance in the reading condition is quite a bit higher than the control condition?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that there wasn't as much agreement among the mediums?
Mm-hmm.
Did you try partitioning the mediums in some way to account for that variance?
That would be something we would have to ask Adam because he did the data analysis for this. So I can't answer that question. The next study we did, so that one with the PCI was a quantitative study. It put a number on the medium's experiences. And then the next one we did was a qualitative investigation of psi versus survival. So we simply asked the mediums to answer to counterbalance questions, describe in as much detail as possible your experiences when communicating with the deceased, and then again, as much detail as possible when you are not communicating with the deceased and retrieving and reporting psychic information. And then a blinded researcher, in this case Christopher Cott, who works with Adam at Deakin, and who is not familiar with mediumship research. So he was a blind investigator. He took the medium's answers to the 2 questions and analyzed them for what's called comprehensive constituent themes. So things that are common among the majority of the answers. And again, we found a number of common themes, but these are just some of them. So during the mediumship, when mediums answered the mediumship question, describe your experiences during a mediumship reading, these are some of the things that we found. Verificatory signs of contact with the discarnate. So one medium said, I have asked for communication and suddenly hear inside my ears a high ringing sound. I am thrilled to know this is contact. So they were experiencing these signs that let them know that indeed contact had been made. That was common. Another one is partial merging with the discarnate. So someone said, sometimes it feels like being in 2 places at the same time. Another theme was apparent independence of the discarnate. So this is a direct quote from this again. Now you would think that being a medium, I would want to look and connect with them sitting on the edge of my bed. What really happens is they startle me, which makes me freak out. So it's this that the deceased is someone different than me, is outside of me.
This is not during a reading, during a research meeting.
This is just, we just asked them, the question is this during a reading or we just asked them, describe your experiences when communicating with the discarnate. So your general experience, yeah. And then the last one here is the experience of, quote, just knowing. So one of the mediums said, when this happens, it is always correct and can even surprise me. So some of the information, the medium just knows it, and this particular medium said when that happens, it's always right. And then when the mediums, and again, these are all certified research mediums that participated in these 2 studies. When these mediums described their experiences during psychic readings or receiving and reporting psychic information, these were some of the things that were common in their answers. Visual, auditory, and tactile information. So one medium said, I see beautiful colors in the aura. And another said, I use my hands to detect health issues in the living person's spirit form. Sorry. Well, I'm reading it out loud. You can hear me. I'll stand back here. Yeah. You can't hear with your eyes, I guess. Empathy is one of the other themes. I can tell if they are skeptical, open, excited, and happy, nervous, sad. And they're talking about the sitter, the living client. Another just knowing was common in psychic readings too. So I may suddenly just know something without any rational explanation. And then another common theme that came up, people were reporting precognition. This is where that quote came. A psychic reading is like reading a book, which represents your aura and energy field that contains past, present, and future information. So we saw there were similarities and differences in those 2 experiences, and both of those papers. This one hasn't come out yet, but it'll be in Transpersonal Psychology Review, and when it does come out, we'll put it on our website. But as our papers get published, we post them on our website if you're interested in downloading them.
Is this research you would like to do more of? Is this kind of a priority?
Yeah, I think this research is definitely a priority because it's helping us get to answer that survival versus psi question. So then Adam and I wrote another paper for the journal Parapsychology that we've submitted. It's a more theoretical paper, just talking about addressing the survival versus psi debate using this process-focused mediumship research. And in that paper, we lay out the study that we would like to do that would really get at the bottom of this and that we are in search of funding for. So, and with that paper, we talk about how if you take mediums' reports that they're communicating with the dead and you add their ability to differentiate between the 2 experiences and you add experimental evidence that the 2 are different under controlled conditions, which we're trying to collect in this future study that we've designed, then you can it starts to make the chasm between survival and psi a little bigger. And you start to lean more towards survival. Dean, this one's just for you. If anyone's familiar with the movie Alien vs. Predator, this is a spoof on, instead of AVP, it's MVP, mediumship versus psi. That's all. Okay, and Dean talked a little bit about drop-ins earlier, but these are some classes of evidence that are consistent with discarnate intention. So there are things that happen during mediumship readings that make us lean even more towards survival than psi, but they're very difficult to design into a study. They just happen spontaneously. So drop-ins where someone unknown to the people involved shows up and then provides information that we can verify later. Interruption. So I ask the medium questions during the readings, and sometimes I'll start on the next question, and the medium will interrupt me and say, "Oh, and they're saying this too." So, which wouldn't make sense if the medium was getting the information telepathically or psychically. And then corrections. So sometimes the medium will say something and then say, "Oh, no, they're saying that that's wrong what I said, that it's really this." So sometimes the discarnate will show the medium a symbol, and the medium will interpret it, and then the discarnate will correct the medium and say, "You were interpreting my symbol wrong, it's this." And so that implies that there's a volitional being providing the information, and that's not just sort of dead information stored in the universe somewhere. And then I just want to talk briefly about, historically, these are some studies that have been listed, or some evidence that listed as ideal, that if we could show this in the lab, then that would be it. It would be the end-all, be-all proof for survival. And I beg to differ. So some of them are, when someone is alive, they have the combination to a lock or some kind of other code, and then after they die, the medium gets that code. And they were the only one who knew the code. And another one is called xenoglossy. So that's the medium responding in a language that the medium doesn't speak to a question posed in that language that the deceased spoke, but the medium doesn't. We talked about that, the chess master earlier. So performing an intellectual task using skills and expertise that the deceased had, but the medium doesn't. Drop-in communicators and cross-correspondence, which is, Dean talked about earlier, information that doesn't make sense until it's brought in from multiple readings. And the problem with those studies is that they contain pervasive and unsupported assumptions about the capabilities, motivation, and interests of the discarnate. So maybe, I couldn't tell you the locker combination to my high school locker. Like, maybe you don't take that information with you to the other side. Maybe it's not important to you because it doesn't have emotional content. Maybe you don't want to play chess anymore. Maybe you don't want to solve a mathematical proof. And maybe, you don't want to speak French or whatever. We don't know. And so those things contain assumptions about what it's like to be dead that we can't verify at this time. The phenomena usually only occur spontaneously. So you can't design in a study a drop-in, because then they're not a drop-in. You've asked, even if you say, we are open to drop-ins during this section of the reading, it still could be psi. And then the limits of psi are unknown. So even if a medium did all of those things that I just listed, you couldn't say that that wasn't through telepathy, clairvoyance, or precognition. It's one of my favorites.
Thinking about it, there's absolutely no way you can separate the two.
Right.
The answer is yeah.
Information that is never in the universe and never will be. That's it. Yeah.
Like this saying on this tag here, perhaps the only limits to the human mind are those we believe in. That too is a belief.
Right. So that's why we're interested in looking at the medium's experiences, because it seems to be the one thing that is very different between the two.
So in this case, science is like somebody's mom who can never be satisfied.
Pretty much.
But it's an open system, and it evolves. So if we're clever enough, maybe we can figure out a way. Well, I'm hoping my mom's evolving on the other side. I'm getting this from your mother.
She says you were in a lot of trouble. Okay, so we talked about proof-focused research, that's just looking for evidence of anomalous information reception, process-focused research that looks at the medium's experiences during communication, and now the third one is applied research, the results of which serve a practical purpose in society. So you would ask me about, am I going to talk about what survives? And I said I'm going to talk about why it doesn't matter. So applied research, it doesn't matter how they're getting their information if it does well in the world. And you can think of it as it doesn't matter how it works as long as it makes people feel good. And the same can be said about most of the drugs on the market. They really don't know how they work, but they do what they're supposed to do. So I think the same thing can be said for this. So one of the big things is grief and mediumship. So this is a quote from Bill. Bill was a research participant, and he said, after the devastating loss of 2 sons, this work has proven to me that we survived the death of our bodies and has made my life not only bearable but worthwhile again. So Bill lost an infant son to a congenital heart defect, and then 30 years later lost I think his son was maybe 22, and he died in a motorcycle accident. So Bill had lost 2 sons, and he really was at his wit's end. He said, it made my life not only bearable again, like his life was unbearable to him. And he had a mediumship reading, and now not only was his life bearable, but worthwhile again. And again, regardless of what's happening and how it works, that's some serious effect that needs to be investigated. I did another research reading once, and during some of our studies, after the quintuple blind process, we do a follow-up phone reading after all the scoring has been done and everything, where the medium and the sitter get to be on the phone at the same time. And there's a part, the first part of it is, we call it sitter silent, and I can talk to the medium, and the medium reports the information, and the sitter can hear it, but they can't say anything. So the medium is still blinded, but the sitter isn't blinded to the information. And so the medium was doing her reading, and she said, I don't know what this means. Again, we only had a first name. I don't know what this means, but the person is saying, you should sell your house. And he's being really adamant about, you should sell your house. And we finished that part, and then the second part, the medium is allowed to ask the sitter yes or no questions, and in the end, I just say, go experiment over, free form, whatever questions you have, go ahead. And so the sitter gave us feedback about that, you should sell the house, and she told us this heart-wrenching story about how her adult son had moved back home after a messy divorce, and their house was way too big for her and her husband, so they thought, when he gets back on his feet and moves out, we're going to sell the house and move into a smaller house. And the son died unexpectedly while he was living there, and at the time of this reading, that was 6 years prior, and she still lived in the house. And she still kept the room the same as when the son died, and she said, now I can sell the house. When he died, my life ended, and now it can start again. Because of what this medium said. Blinded to all the story, the medium said, you should sell the house. He's saying, you should sell the house. And this changed that woman's life. And again, it doesn't matter how it works, why it works, that is helping people. So we're scientists, so we want to bring that into the lab systematically. So we did this pilot study online where we just asked people who had seen a certified medium these questions. We were looking for these aims. So what is the effect on grief of a reading with a modern American certified mental medium? And how does that effect compare to that of working with a mental health professional? You will be surprised. You will be surprised.